Women in the Academy and Professions and Emerging Scholars Network. We're delighted today to welcome you to Power Women. I'm Hannah Eagleson, Associate Director of Emerging Scholars Network, and we're thrilled that you are joining us today. Our moderator will be Karen Guzman. Karen leads InterVarsity's Women in the Academy and Professions and has extensive experience as an entrepreneur, helping to start grad fellowships at Michigan State and the MBA fellowship at Georgia Tech. And she really loves to use her gifts of hospitality and teaching to create a welcoming place for people to connect with God and with each other. And I think you'll enjoy experiencing that today. And she also loves British television, something that I share with her. So we're delighted to introduce Karen, and she's going to introduce our panel. Before we do that, though, we just want to note that this event will be recorded. So if you are not comfortable with being recorded, feel free to take a moment here to turn off your camera so that you won't show up on the recording. And while you do that, I'll just give a very brief preview to introduce Karen Guzman, who will introduce our panelists. Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank you, Hannah. It is such a pleasure to partner with Emerging Scholars Network to host this conversation. Let me introduce our panel today, which consists of 4 of the authors of the new book, Power Women: Stories of Motherhood, Faith, and the Academy. Joining us today is Dr. Stephanie Chan. Stephanie is an associate professor of sociology at Biola University in Southern California. Dr. Jennifer Powell McNutt is also with us. Jennifer is an associate professor and holds the Franklin S., I'm going to say this wrong, Darnus Chair of Biblical and Theological Studies at Wheaton College in Illinois. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Welcome, Jennifer. We also have Dr. Doretha O'Quinn, and she also joins us from Southern California, where she is the CEO and president of BridgeBuilder Consulting Group. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Ji Sun joins us this afternoon. Ji is a professor of psychology and the director of the Learning Lab at Cal State LA. Welcome, panelists. It's so great to have you with us today. My team has been hosting conversations at the intersection of faith, motherhood, and the academy for years. So we are super excited about this book. And we are so glad that all of you and your co-authors have labored to provide what I think is a real gift to Christian academic mothers and those who work and live alongside them. So thank you. Since this conversation is about motherhood, would each of you tell us who you are mother to and maybe share a comical motherhood moment? I'm gonna ask Ji if you would start out that.
Hi, my name is Ji Sun, and I'm a mother to a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old boy. So most of our comical moments are not suitable for talking about, because it has to do with butts, farts, and poops 100% of the time. But I did think of one moment that didn't have to do with those things. So I was really thrilled with myself. I was like, oh my God, we sometimes have moments that are appropriate for regular life. And my son and I, we look at the Economist cartoons together, political cartoons, and he's 7 years old, but he's learned all the faces of like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, but only in cartoon form. He could identify them. And he had heard on the news, oh, like New Zealand and Taiwan are doing really well in COVID numbers. And he's like, hey, it really seems like those places with female leaders, like female presidents, are doing real well in this COVID pandemic. He's like, how come we don't have a female leader? And I was like, it's a very good question. I think you should maybe write that up.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Ji. How about you, Jennifer? Can you tell us who you're a mom to and maybe a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got 3 kids ranging from a teenager to a preschooler. So there's kind of a span going through lots of different seasons all at the same time. So my husband is also in academics, and he's an academic editor for InterVarsity. So press, so I'll throw that out there. So we are constantly talking about books and ideas and theology and church history, at the dinner table. And, we were just in this conversation, the kids are just there listening, or whatever. And then all of a sudden my 3-year-old says, "Who is John Calvin?" And it was so beautiful. We just laughed so hard. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to explain John Calvin to my 3-year-old. And it was just a wonderful academic mother moment. So
That's great. That's great. Stephanie, would you be willing to tell us who you are mom to and maybe a comical motherhood moment as well?
Yes, I'm mom to 2 boys, a 6-year-old and an almost 9-year-old. He's turning 9 on Halloween, and he loves having the Halloween birthday. My story is not academic at all, but one of my parent pet peeves is the school dress up days, like crazy hair day, different color of the rainbow day, different shade of pink day for, whatever breast cancer, where it is, it's true. They do have that. So one week it was like holiday week, and it was like one of the days was holiday hat day. And of course I never have anything planned. So 10 minutes before we're supposed to get ready for school, I like grab like a cardboard box that fits on my son's head. I wrap it in wrapping paper. I put a bow on it. I even put in like the cushion from like the Amazon boxes on the inside to make it comfortable and fit well. And I like throw it on his head. I'm like, I am so awesome. I was like, I am so awesome. I got a holiday hat ready in 10 minutes, And so then I drove him to school, and I kind of noticed there wasn't very many festive kids, that day. And then I picked him up from school, and I was like, hey, how was holiday hat day? Did people like your hat? And he's like, it wasn't holiday hat day, Mom. It's tomorrow. And I was like, I'm so sorry, sweetheart, and I was like, were you embarrassed? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, well, are you going to wear your holiday hat tomorrow? He's like, no. So I've had many of those kind of moments.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. All right, Doretha, you want to wrap this up? Tell us who you are a mother to and a comical moment.
All right, I'm grateful to do that. And I too, like Stephanie, it won't be academic at this point, but I am the mother of 4 adult children. But those memories of their childhood keeps me alive, even above those 9 grandchildren I have. But I have been a mother who has contributed to the middle child syndrome, and I contributed in a way that while it wasn't funny then, it is funny now when I think about it, because he never lets me forget. My husband and I were youth pastors, and it was at the time Chuck E. Cheese was really for the young people, right? Not just children, but the young people. We had a youth meeting there, and my husband and I had the little one and my youngest one, and he was about 2, and the one that is the middle child, but in between the 2 older, was at the little roll pin circular thing where you throw the ball into the hole, And we all loaded up in the van to leave. And my husband said, well, she's the other advisor, she has Jamal in the back, right? And so we're off and running. And so when we get to Cynthia's house, I said, hey, pass me Jamal up to the front. And she said, I don't have Jamal. Well, she's was always playing tricks. And I'm like, oh, yes, you have Jamal. Stop playing. Ends up, Jamal was left at Chuck E. Cheese at 3 years old. I called and I asked, please tell me, he was standing there rolling the pin. And the guy went and found him. and kept
praise the
him
Lord.
until my husband gets there. He puts on brake and just get out, leave the car open. Two of the kids jump out to go and try and find him. Well, when he got back to me, his first comments were, "Mommy, you left me. You left me." And truly, as a middle child, I have tried to leave him as much as I can. No, just kidding. But, you know, that's kind of a funny moment I'll never forget. And he never lets me forget when he does middle child goofy stuff. It's because you forgot me.
That's right. Well, and I think he has permission to never let you forget it, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving us just a little snapshot, right, of your motherhood experiences. So let's turn a little bit and think about your experiences in the academy. Historically, the university has not been a friendly place for women in general. Being a parent adds an additional layer of challenge for most women. And nearly 10 years ago, there was a research team at UC Berkeley who released a book called "Do Babies Matter? Gender and Family in the Ivory Tower," where they coined the phrase, the baby penalty. Stephanie, you referred to this in your chapter. Today, most universities think of themselves and they publicize themselves as modern, liberal, progressive, and welcoming to women in their policies, procedures, and structures. Those have often lagged behind their rhetoric. So I'm curious, what have been some of the challenges that you've encountered along the way as an academic mother, whether from academia in general or from a particular institution or department? Stephanie, I'm going to ask you if you would be willing to answer that first.
Sure. So I overall think of my institution is pretty supportive, which I write about in the chapter. I would say it kind of comes in more subtle ways. I think one of the things I was thinking about when you posed this question, Karen, is that I think there's a perception of mothers as less capable, less competent. And I think it's very subtle in the sense of like, oh, I won't promote this person to a leadership position. She's probably too busy with her children. Because I have noticed at my institution, it's like when someone is like tapped for leadership, it's usually someone who is childless or a father, but it's never the mothers. And I think it's kind of like this benevolent sexism in that, oh, we know she's too busy with her kids, we won't bother her at this time with this. But then you also never get the opportunity or the ask. And we also at one point were changing our promotion system. And I had expressed concern about how it was being changed. And I spoke with a leader at my university and I said, I don't think this point system is fair. And I expressed different things. And she said to me, Stephanie, some of us, like, you know, us mothers, we're on the slower track and you just need to accept that, you know? And so rather than, you know, saying, hey, yeah, I agree, let's, you know, look at what's unfair, she made it my problem as a mother, as opposed to a problem with the system. And I also had a student evaluation. I was teaching a graduate research methods class, and I had just taught this class the previous semester as well, but I was pregnant that semester. But the next semester I taught it. In my evaluation, it says, you know, Dr. Chan taught this better this semester than when she was pregnant. And that student would never have any baseline to make that judgment because they weren't in that class. So I think one of the things like that stands out to me is that it's often this kind of motherhood is seen as a liability oftentimes in the university, and not necessarily in these very obvious ways. It's more in these, like, it could be even in a kind of benevolent way, right? Or sure, I'm trying to help you, you know, just feel better about yourself. It's okay. You're a mom. Don't worry about trying to promote, you know? So yeah, so I think those are the kinds of, like, those are the types of challenges I've seen personally. But I think in a lot of ways, I did choose my university because it seemed family friendly. And when I interviewed, people had talked about their kids and all the time they spend with them. And so that was really attractive to me about the university. But yeah, those are kind of the ways in which I kind of experience some of these challenges.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Stephanie. Any of the rest of you want to respond to that question about what challenges you've encountered as you along the way as an academic mother?
Chime in just a little, just because I think,
Sure.
in addition to the responsibilities at our institutions, we're often like researchers or, chemists or sociologists or whatever we are. And those jobs could be all consuming if you allowed it to, right? Like,
Sure.
like it could just take over every moment of your waking life, right? And family pushes back against that all-consuming force, And so, I think about like moments where I've been writing grants and I'm like, I have 1 hour while my child is napping to finish this section of the grant, and I'm turning it in. I don't care how bad it is. That's my deadline. And so there's like deadlines imposed to us by the world, but there's also deadlines imposed to us by our lives.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it's a great question. I was just thinking about being at Wheaton College at my institution, and it was historically, it was the first college in America to offer complete unisex curriculum in American history in 1860. And it's really incredible when you look at some place like Harvard, that was like the mid 20th century, that's when that happened. But when I arrived in 2008, there were just all these policies that made it difficult to not run yourself ragged, to manage the tenure clock. The first thing for me was that there wasn't a maternity leave policy at all. So that was really compounded by the fact that faculty don't get vacation, we don't accrue as much sick leave as others, and if you have a baby, I had a baby right before I arrived, so it's just those kinds of things that were very, very challenging. And then they also had a nepotism policy, which prevented my husband from being able to apply for jobs in the department that was open. And so they also weren't recognizing that oftentimes, according to a study from Stanford a few years ago, when women in academics get married, they often will marry someone who's in their field. They meet them in grad school or whatever. And so that those kinds of things really made it very challenging. And then I think the last thing that I'll just mention that came up for me was, since I do archival research and I work on European history, I have to go there and be able to do it. And, it's like, I can't just pop in for a few days, I have to go for a month or, to make it worth it. And I really struggled with just the fact that none of the grant money allows for the kind of childcare support that you need in order to go on those kinds of trips. And at the time, especially, I was the only breadwinner in our family. So it's like, how do I do this? How do I do the tenure clock and, meet those standards? And, there's a huge financial strain, frankly, on being able to do the work. So there was just some of those systemic issues. And I will say there is kind of a good part of the story, which was banding together with other female faculty. We did, and some male faculty who supported us too, we were able to get some of those policies changed. So I appreciate the institution for listening, but that's been a challenge. So
yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Doretha, do you have anything you want to add about challenges that you encountered along the way?
Yeah, I think that while I'm not in the academy now, I have been, and I've been on all those different steps from faculty to dean to vice provost to provost. And one of the things, particular dynamic that's very visible, being an African-American woman and being pretty much in a lot of the leadership positions as the only one or the only one on the faculty. And one of the things of dealing with that aspect and loving who I am, loving who I'm created to be, and having no apologies for it because I love me. But having my children, one of the things that I found myself, because I had no one, and I pretty much made this somewhat of a cultural thing for me of saying, of making it very clear to everybody that my kids came first, and whatever I had to do, if it meant your school and my kids, I'm out, so that in itself is like, okay, girl gone wild here. So, but there was still this sense of, finding my voice around those issues, and knowing at the time I was serving in those areas, not having voices around me to talk about, to talk to about those things. So as a result, I had to tend to make my way by voicing what I had to do with my kids. My kids are very active in sports, very active at school. And it was like, when they speak, I gotta go. And that wasn't always the nicest of nice to hear. But I just had to, and it was hard because I had to figure out, okay, how am I gonna say this tough thing? Or how am I gonna, so I had all these, how would I say, script planning, and finding myself having to look at it from two lenses, a mother and being an African-American woman, and trying to make sure that I'm not put in a box to make a decision. And so, it wasn't easy. And then when I just couldn't, I found myself having to, I had to talk to my kids and help make definition for them to understand, okay, mom's going to be there, mom's going to not be right there, right on time because of. So I realized that there was some give and take, but at the end of the day, my family, I had to have that part of me because they weren't going to be, that wasn't my family at work. So.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's going to look at our CV on our funerals. No one's going to talk about our citations,
No,
right.
No, because at the end of the day, when you're not there, guess what? They're going to HR. We need a person in this position, and your kids won't go to HR.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds to me like it's not just challenging from the actual situations, but also from a sense, at least what I'm hearing from you is that some of you felt really alone in that. You were the only one saying some of these things. So that's part of why your book is a gift, is to help other women realize they're not alone, and that there's this fairly large community out there of women who are sharing the same sorts of experiences and can speak into each other's lives in ways that are helpful. So yeah, thank you for that. So I'm going to ask each of you a question about the chapter that you wrote in the book. And Stephanie, I'm going to begin with you. Your chapter is entitled The Synergy of Syllabi and Lullaby. While not wanting to discount or ignore real challenges, you encourage readers to consider the ways that their experiences as mothers make them better academics, and vice versa, a phenomenon known as work-life enrichment. Can you say a bit more about that and maybe give an example from your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I write from the perspective of both being the child of an academic mother and also being an academic mother myself. And I think partially, so I draw from both of those experiences to talk about the experience of what is called work-life enrichment. I think because there's so much, the dominant narrative seems to be the distressed working mom who's like frazzled and can't do everything and is just struggling, right? And that is something even the content analysis of newspaper articles will show. There's more articles about the distressed working mother than the thriving working mother, right? And so I just wanted to provide a counter narrative to that because it's true of my experience as a child, true of my experience as a mother as well. So the term work-life enrichment comes from psychologists, I believe they're psychologists, Greenhouse and Powell, and they talk about how each role can enhance the other or provide resources for the other. So they say there's 5 types of resources that one role can provide for the other, which includes skills and perspectives, psychological and physical resources, social capital resources, flexibility, and then material resources as well. And for me, I think what I really, I give examples mainly from the areas of psychological resources, as well as skills and perspectives. So work definitely provides psychological resources for me. I know all of us probably need, as academics, we are drawn to academics because we need intellectual stimulation, right? That is what gets us going. Our work is life-giving to us. Reading books is life-giving to us. Like studying minutia of things is life-giving to us. So like when I had my kids, I found myself feeling so depleted because I felt like I was just like burping them and like rocking them and feeding them in an endless cycle. And I felt very isolated. I didn't have a lot of social interaction with the way that we parent in, I think in the US. And so I would do these things, like I would like have these dates with my girlfriends and be like, can you meet with me so I can have an adult conversation? And so I call these Stephanie needs adult conversations or snacks, right? So I would need these snacks, right? But I found that when I went back to work, I didn't even need that anymore because I was so engaged in work that it buoyed me for my family responsibilities. And then vice versa. Academia is such a like toxic place sometimes, it's a harsh place. And I was like, I describe it to people sometimes. It's like, what other job are people constantly criticizing you, right? It's like, the reviewers of the articles are criticizing you, like the people that you give presentations to are critiquing you, your students are critiquing you. And so I'm like, you need some kind of psychological coping, right? And so a great outlet for that is family, because like when you go home and your kid's like, I love you, mommy. Right now, my kid's in like, he loves to spell everything. So he's always like, ILOVE space MOMMY, like, so after I've like dealt with all that, if I go home and I hear that, it's just like, okay, that's gone, that's gone. I can put that behind me. So it's psychological, both ways it provides these psychological resources, but it also provides skills and perspectives, like there's literature that shows that women are rated as more engaged in their work and better leaders in a lot of ways, and or mothers, I should say specifically. And it's because we have all these skills like negotiating with, difficult human beings, it's a skill that transfers from home to work, right? Trying to like, plan a project and manage all the details is something that we do at home and work and transfers as well. And so I think if any of us think back to our pre-mother self, wouldn't you say that your mother self is like this enhanced version of your pre-child self, and that you have all these new skills that you didn't have before and that you can apply to your work as well? And so I see a lot of skill transfer in terms of whether it's leadership or whether it's like empathy for students and seeing them as whole human beings. I think that's been enhanced by being a mother. And so in my chapter, I just build on this idea of work-life enrichment. And if you look at studies and you compare, work-life conflict with work-life enrichment, most mothers will say there's greater work-life enrichment in their life than work-life conflict. And so I wonder, like, why aren't we telling this story? Like, why aren't we talking about that? Because it's definitely a part of our lives that I feel like we need to talk about more.
Yeah, that's great.
And because Facebook is not giving you 5 points for happiness.
Right, exactly.
No one's mad about that.
That's right. That's right. And who knew making a holiday hat would make you a better professor, right? So there you go. All right, G, your chapter is entitled Recategorization, and it's about learning to give ourselves grace. And one of the main ways that you have done that personally is by thinking of yourself as a female dad. Can you explain what you mean by that and why that's helped you?
Yes. No, because I think perhaps I'm not alone in this, but I compare myself to other mothers who are clearly better than me. But a lot of times I realize I'm comparing myself to like a 1950s housewife where mothering is their whole thing. Like I baked a box cake with my children and I was like, oh my God, am I amazing? But of course, I'm not going to post that on Instagram because nobody's going to be proud of me for like following the instructions from a box cake with my children. But, you know, when I think about like mothers who we like really admire, you know, like the Instagram mothers who are like perfectly coiffed and their children all look at the camera and smile, whereas I cannot get my children to both open their eyes at the same time for the camera. Like I feel like a constant failure, right? But then I'm like, oh, I look at this other area of my life, and Stephanie's right. That other area of my life also makes me feel like a constant failure sometimes, but it also buoys me because I feel like, oh, there's a reason why I'm not baking organic cakes by like pounding my own flour. It's because I'm like discovering new statistics and like doing all this cool stuff. You know, I'm like inventing new things and putting out knowledge in the world. I'm doing other things. I am too busy to get both my children to look at the camera. And it made me realize, you know what? If I compare myself to like a 1950s dad, right? I baked a box cake with my children. Like, oh my God, like, is that the best dad ever? Like, it makes me feel so like, wow, I am going above and beyond my household duties. Like, I feel so like buoyed, and like, it makes me feel like everything I do at home is like the extra credit of life as a mom, you know? And it makes me also feel like, you know, if I compare myself to other dads, I am clearly better than them. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I like cook dinner like 3 times a week. Oh my God, am I amazing? You know, like there's just this moment where I give myself a little grace and be like, okay, yes, I ordered out a lot. Yes, I just microwaved something for them a lot. But you know what? I cooked 3 times. Yay for me, you know? And it just makes me realize, yeah, sometimes my lack of grace is from me. It's from my own lack of grace to myself. And so it's almost like I like the title of this book, The Discipline of Grace. You know, it's looking at yourself with the eyes that God has for yourself, for you. Yeah. And so I think of God looking at me, who sees my whole life, not just the part I do at home, but he sees my whole life. And I think of God saying to me, I see everything that you do. I give you credit for it all.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thanks, G. Jennifer, your chapter reflects on your experience of managing or maybe juggling a threefold call to motherhood, to academia, and then also to the pastorate. And you identify 3 key influencers to your flourishing: a support system, time management, and then clarity of conviction about why you do what you do. I'd like us to focus a little bit on the support system piece of that combination. What have been key support systems to you over the years? And how might that shape advice that you would offer to women at the front end of their careers as they think about things like who to marry and where to look for jobs, right? And then I'm going to add one more little piece to this. And then also, do you have any suggestions or encouragement for women who find themselves in new places where they might not have those sorts of systems in place?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my chapter is trying to weave sort of the 3 different threads all together, which was fun and complex and a challenge in itself, to think through them. And yeah, one of the things I did land on was support system. And I think one of the reasons for that was because my first year, when I had just defended my dissertation, I got my job, I had my first child, then we moved internationally. We moved from England back to the US, and all of that happened in a matter of weeks. It was like, just so in that first year, it was so hard because it was also a new place. My husband was doing his PhD and we had a new baby. It was the economic crisis of 2008. So all of our salaries were low and frozen, and, you know, things like childcare costs and were just some really basic needs that we had, and just getting to know each other. So getting to know our community. So that was a hard time. I don't even totally remember that first year. I'm not sure what happened. Somehow we got through, but I really had to lean in on just other faculty members in my cohort, especially other women. There weren't a lot of us, but just seeking out mentoring from some of the women that were just ahead of me in the stages. Sort of how have you managed this? How have you done this, sort of strategizing with them? So I think mentoring is really important. Actually reaching out to female faculty in other schools, other places, just saying, hey, would you be my friend? How are you? Like we're on the playground as kids or something. But because they, other women really understand this. And so I think having that support, that encouragement, people who get why it is that you're doing what you're doing, that's so important, because it's very easy for someone to just say like, oh, it's so hard. Well, then don't work, if that's even an option. But anyway, besides that, leave that question aside, it's sort of like, well, why not take away all those obstacles? And so in my chapter, I really want to focus on a calling, a sense of vocation, how the Lord has called me to these different locations and to do this work, to use the gifts that he's given me, how I've been equipped. And that is part of who I am and who God's called me to be. And I need people who believe in that mission that God has given me, and that I can complain to, or, sort of share my struggles with, but not then question that, that my calling is, whether my calling is a good thing or not. So I think that family has been key in that, friends who've known me a long time, and then getting to the husband or the spouse, is so important, to have someone who, who sees the gifts that you have, who sees the calling that the Lord's laid on your life, and believes that is necessary, that's important, and is willing to work with you to figure out how you can manage that. And then I think too, if you're thinking about an equitable marriage, to also see that in your spouse, and to also be able, there is a give and a take. There are different seasons where one person maybe needs more support than the other, or different moments. And my husband and I we really try to live that out. That is not easy, but we really believe in that, and try to be a support for each other. So it's only been, so the first 8 years, that was partly what we were dealing with. And then now my parents have moved nearby, and so we now have some family support. And I will say it's a game changer in a lot of ways. Our thought is that, they're helping us now when we need a lot of it, and we're going to be helping them. And so it's a commitment to each other. And, as they have retired and they're moving into that stage. So I know that also be dealing with the intergenerational needs, that will be a reality, that will be complex. So I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I know that is ahead. So, yeah, so just those are my thoughts in terms of support. And in my chapter, I talk about, just someone who can pray with you, someone you can cry to, you had a bad meeting and you just want to vent, but you don't want them to tell anybody. So we need those kinds of people who can be around and bolster us in our callings. So.
Super, thank you. Doretha, your chapter is on mentoring. And you include some really helpful things in it about self-care. Would you say a bit about that, what you mean by self-care, and why it's important for busy women who are juggling a lot of different things?
Right. And thank you. One of the things that when I think of self-care, first thing I think about is, one, we spend a lot of time doing so much for others that when it comes time for us, we have very little. And when I talk about self-care, it is about caring for yourself, really. and understanding, and and that was something that I found very important, being a senior academia and some of the younger women coming in. And when I would spend time with them, either in a mentoring relationship, coaching, or whatever, I found myself hearing more so about how to climb the ladder versus how to keep me healthy and how to keep me sane to a certain degree. But I really, I think that, well, not I think, but there's materials out there. But one of the books that I had early on, because Stephanie said we like those books, and I found myself learning a lot about just lifing, if I could say that. And it was Ordering Your Private World by Gordon MacDonald. And really beginning to think about the kinds of things that are important. What do I like that makes me feel really good? I like getting my nails done. I like going to the hairdresser. I like going shopping. I don't have a whole lot of money, but I promise you, I like being by myself, walking through the mall, coming out with just a pair of earrings. Even our budget planning, it's here's, tithe to God, and here's a little bit for yourself. But being mindful of the importance of self-care. And I believe that is a biblical principle. For I saw it in Jesus. If you read the Gospels, how often did you hear and see him say, I'm going to the other side, I'm getting away. He's on the boat when the storm is raging and he's asleep. He is really everything about him showing us how to live. That was one aspect of it. So when I think about self-care, I think about, okay, how do I care for myself spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, culturally, everything that makes me me. That, like G said, that holistic me. I'm not that one in the kitchen either, G. But at the end of the day, I find myself knowing that I want that appointment at the nail shop. I want to get a massage every now and again. I want to hang out with my girls. I have, we used to have when in the academy, for me, I used to have me time moments. This is my time. And my husband and I, when I talk about ordering our private worlds, we sit together, and basically Friday nights is his time. Do you believe I get mad when he don't go to a game on a Friday night? Because that's my time, and even with the kids, don't insult me by taking my time. They know that they're, if mom was, well, let me just go on and say, spiritually, I love Ruth Haley Barton's book on sacred rhythms, finding those things that are important for me. I need time with God. I need time to be quiet and still. This is a part of self-care, my prayer time, my scripture reading, being able to know that everything about the things that are important for me spiritually, I need that so that I could be refreshed to help others. The same thing about, you keep hearing me say my nails, I love it. It's time to get them filled. So at the end of the day, but we don't see it like that. We're seeing ourselves trying to get that pay, get those grades in, and I'm do that, I'm still doing that. But the reality is I actually put myself into my day. It's like, this is my time to be still. Those with young children, you need to take a nap when they're taking a nap. I know I heard Jen say, well, I'm gonna get this done. No, take care of yourself. Sleep, take some time, because we want everybody around a long time. And I know when it comes to death rates in women, it's higher. And so one of the things we have to understand is, what are we doing to ourselves not to really take time to care? Laughing, enjoying life. I love you, Jen. And I mean, I love to laugh and enjoy that. It's good like medicine. So having time to really think about the things that make me feel much better, getting those health checkups. I'm deathly afraid going to the mammogram. I just had one a couple of days ago. Oh my God, does it hurt? But the reality is taking care of yourself and being healthy, loving your makeup, I think about Esther. Esther had an everyday massage and mush and all of that other stuff. And, at the end of the day, yes, she was a queen, but she didn't want that stuff. But you didn't see after she started getting all those beauty baths and all that, you didn't hear, well, Esther wanted to run away. And she liked that. I mean, and I think that we have to understand as women, professors, that us having the refreshing of ourselves allows us to give more and give better, only because we're not consumed with everything around. We're in the mix of what consumes us. So when I think about that, I think about, eating healthy, exercising, taking a walk. I look for every ounce of pain in my body to say, well, I can't exercise today. I want pain. And it's like, it's not there. Get up and go walk, but I utilize that time to just reflect on. I like to go to a park. We have a nice, beautiful park with a lot of greenery. And it just causes me to think about, wow, look at God, what God created for me to enjoy. You have to be refreshed in order to give fresh. And I think that that's one thing we often find ourselves. And sometimes, we get into the Christianese where, oh, that's vain. Oh, that's in your flesh. Well, God created my flesh and I get to take care of it because it's his temple. And so if I'm not able, I see that, let me just say, I see that as being a common conversation that I have with young women, older women, it's like, so where do you spend time with you? Well, I don't have time. That's not true. You make time. I had a friend say to me years ago that, do you own your time? You are so busy, you don't own your time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I own my time. But then there are times I have to cancel an appointment for this or for that. And I just think that it's very important. And that's why I wrote about mentoring. I think that being a senior academic or being an older woman, being able to speak into the lives of young women, I think that that's the key to my health, caring for myself. It's not vain. It's not fleshly, because when I see that my Savior did it, and people came to him at moments he was eating, he said what he had to say quickly, and then kept doing what he was doing. So anyway, when I say self-care, that's exactly it. Caring for yourself, finding something that you love doing, that and sometimes you have to have that conversation, like Jen said, have a conversation with my husband and say, look, I need 2 hours just for me. I don't want phones. I don't want, and not feeling guilty. Take that guilt hat off and be free. I'm sorry. I'm done.
Hey.
But it's something I'm passionate about. And I think is very important, especially for women in the academy, because we're always, we're always stroking, we're always stroking. And yet everybody else gets it but us.
Thank you. Thank you, Doretha. So you all have a great introduction to this amazing book, right? Listening to these 4 authors. And you need to stay tuned, because at the end of our time this afternoon, we're going to tell you how to get a discount on this book and an invitation to take part in a book club reading and discussing it. So hang on to the end. I'm wondering if anyone has a question for any of these folks. Pop it into the chat. And while I'm waiting for those to come into the chat, I'm going to ask one more question. What advice do you all have for men who want to be good brothers to their female colleagues? Who would like to address that question? Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'll just start off. There's a lot to be said, I think, but but I think one thing that would be really wonderful if we saw more of would be, citing our work, using what we've written in classes, sort of boosting the scholarship that we do accomplily, and teaching it to the students at your institution. And because I think there is a real push and desire to have more diverse voices in our syllabi. So here's the chance, reach out to fellow female faculty members in your discipline to say, what should I be including in my syllabus? So I think that's a big part of it, frankly.
Great, thanks. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Doretha.
I think one for me is not patronizing me. Mm-hmm. And I would use the word stereotype, or, not bringing to the table, well, you're a woman, or you're a mother, or, really being an advocate. And as Jennifer said, yes, using our works as well, but looking to advance us or encourage advancement among your brothers, and to if you're really wanting to advocate, help your brothers understand the value and worth you see in what you can bring to the table. Sure. And not that we can hold our own, but really not patronizing or putting us in a little box here, but looking for what we bring to the table and advancing that.
Great, thanks. Well, I've got one question in the chat I want to ask as our final question. So this person says, do you have any advice for finding God's purpose in our academic posts, especially at secular institutions? And especially as we get more breathing room towards our, at mid-career, and as our kids become a little bit more self-sufficient, like Jennifer said, we're called and equipped for the positions we're in now. And I can only trust that God has led me here, but I'm searching for how I can serve better in my post, especially at this mid-career stage. So G, I'm going to throw that at you, since you are at a secular institution.
Yeah, I'm sitting at my secular institution.
There you go.
Cal State LA. And yeah, I think about this a lot. I even have, I don't know if you could see it, but right there, I have a prayer for my students that I try to pray over them, because sometimes they frustrate me. And sometimes I'm like, why didn't you do your homework? Why didn't you do the reading? And, to pray that over them. But yeah, I think about this a lot, especially as a cognitive scientist, as a statistician, as somebody who's trying to make inroads in a completely secular field. This is actually the first overtly Christian thing I've ever really written out there. It's not something that I'm known for, if I'm known for anything at all. And so it is one of the things that I've been thinking about, what does it mean to find God's purpose here? And I think I've seen it in a number of different ways. Many of our secular institutions have a real care for social justice. And for me, I care about that, but for many reasons, not just as an academic, not just as a Christian, but really because of both, because I'm a mother who wants my children to understand what kind of world we live in and how to make change in that world, And so I think even finding, for me, I'm really involved in things like talking about remediation courses or mathematical achievement and the achievement gap in California. And, thinking about all those pieces as places that I'm in, not only because of my PhD and the work and expertise that I bring, but also that I've been chosen to go into these places by God as well. And so, to always bring that whole part of me with me.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, G. Well, we are about out of time. So I am going to say thank you so much again for writing your chapters, for being a part of this great project, and then for giving your time this afternoon to chat with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hannah, I'm going to hand this back to you so you can give us a few announcements and a book discount, and then we'll be finished.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to also thank the panelists one more time and thank ESN's director, Bob Truby, for running tech for us today. And we have a couple of announcements. So there will be a WELL book club on Power Women coming up. And I believe Bob is going to put that slide up with details on that shortly. So we would love for you to be able to join that. And to make that easier, oh, here we are. So to make that easier, as you can see, we've arranged a 40% off discount for copies of Power Women. There's a link there that you can use and a code, and this is good until November 2nd. And I believe you can claim that discount whether you join the book group or not. But of course, we'd love for you to be able to join the group. So please do check that out. It's a wonderful opportunity to get this book and learn more from these wonderful women. So I believe there's also a slide detailing a little bit more about the book club itself. So I think Bob will share that once you've had a chance. There we are. So this is coming up in November, as you see, and there are details there. So definitely take a look at that and see if that's something you can do. It would be a wonderful opportunity to connect with both the book and other colleagues who are women and who are thinking these things through. And I noticed someone mentioned in the chat that they're already looking forward to that and have their copy already. So that's fantastic. And then we'd also love to invite you to an Emerging Scholars Network event. So this one is called God in the Modern Wing. And I really appreciated what Doretha was saying about taking time to be replenished and to enjoy things. And for many people, art is one way to do that. And so we're going to have a couple of speakers talking about engaging, especially with modern art as Christians based on a recent IVP book. And so it'll be a great chance to hear from Cameron Anderson and G. Walter Hansen on that topic. And they'll be in conversation with Bobby Gross, who directs grad and faculty ministries, where both Women in the Academy and Professions and ESN are housed. So it's a great chance to hear from him. He's very knowledgeable about modern art as well. So I think he'll be a wonderful interviewer. Thank you so very much for joining us today. We're truly delighted that you could. Please feel free to connect with Emerging Scholars Network also. And as you see, Bob has put up some details on how to do that. We'd love for you to join for free and get our monthly updates. And we have some upcoming opportunities, including research grant funding that we publicize early in the year. So please join us at both the WELL and Emerging Scholars Network. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll wrap up there.